The morning sun beat down on the cracked sidewalk as Dorothy Wilson made her way along 5th Street. At 78, she still prided herself on her independence. Every Tuesday, rain or shine, she walked the 6 blocks to Morgan's pharmacy to pick up her blood pressure medication and browse the greeting card aisle, though there were fewer people to send cards to these days. Dorothy adjusted her wide-brimmed hat, a faded blue thing she'd owned for more summers than she could count. The heat was different today, thicker somehow. The weatherman had warned about a heat wave, but Dorothy hadn't thought much of it. She'd lived through plenty of hot summers, and besides, she didn't like to run the air conditioner unless absolutely necessary. The electric bills were already high enough. Just a bit further, she mumbled to herself, clutching her worn leather purse closer to her side as she passed the bakery. The sweet smell of fresh bread made her stomach growl, reminding her that she'd skipped breakfast that morning. There hadn't seemed much point in cooking for one, and her appetite wasn't what it used to be anyway. A cup of tea had been enough, or so she'd thought. Dorothy paused at the crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. The world tilted slightly, and she reached out to steady herself against a lamppost. Strange. She'd felt fine when she left home. Maybe she should have brought a bottle of water. The dizziness passed, and she continued on her way, her sensible shoes making soft tapping sounds against the pavement. Across the street, Keisha Taylor was helping her children into their minivan. Her husband Lamar was adjusting the GPS for the drive to their son Andre's basketball tournament in the next county. "Did you pack the cooler?" Lamar asked, glancing up from his phone. "Yes, an extra Gatorade for after the game," Keisha replied, closing the back door after making sure their daughter Nia had her seatbelt fastened. "Andre, do you have your lucky socks?" Their 14-year-old son nodded from the back seat, barely looking up from his handheld game. "Got 'em, Mom. Then we're all set," Lamar said, starting the engine. "If we leave now, we'll have time to stop for lunch before the first game." The family pulled away from the curb, music playing softly on the radio as they chatted about the tournament ahead. None of them noticed the elderly woman across the street who had begun to walk unsteadily. Dorothy felt the dizziness return as she passed the hardware store. This time it was worse, a spinning sensation that made the storefronts blur together. She tried to focus on the pharmacy sign ahead, now only 2 blocks away. Her vision tunneled, darkness creeping in from the edges. "Oh dear," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her shopping list fluttered from her hand, carried away by a gentle breeze. Dorothy reached for a nearby bench, but it was too far. The sidewalk seemed to rise up to meet her as her knees buckled. The last thing she remembered was the feeling of her cheek against hot concrete and the distant sound of tires, screeching. Inside the Taylor family's minivan, 10-year-old Nia was the first to spot Dorothy's collapse. "Dad, Dad, look!" she cried, pointing out the window. "That lady just fell down." Lamar glanced in the direction his daughter was pointing and immediately hit the brakes, pulling over to the curb. "Stay in the car," he instructed Andre, then turned to his wife. "Keisha, you should check on her. You know what to do." Keisha was already unbuckling her seatbelt. As a nurse practitioner at County General Hospital, she'd handled countless emergencies. "Call 911, she told her husband as she rushed from the vehicle. Lamar nodded, phone already in hand as he followed her. Nia, ignoring her father's instructions to stay put, scrambled out after them. Dorothy was conscious but confused when Keisha reached her side. Her pale face was flushed with heat, beads of sweat dotting her forehead. "Ma'am? Can you hear me?" Keisha asked, kneeling beside the fallen woman. She gently took Dorothy's wrist, checking her pulse. "I'm a nurse. We're going to help you." Dorothy's faded blue eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. "My groceries," she murmured, trying to sit up. "I need to get my medicine." "Don't try to move just yet," Keisha said firmly but kindly. She turned to Nia, who stood wide-eyed nearby. "Honey, go back to the car and bring me the water bottle from my purse." Lamar crouched down next to them, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, an elderly woman has collapsed on 5th Street near the intersection with Maple. She's conscious but disoriented. My wife is a nurse and is with her now." While her parents tended to Dorothy, Nia returned with the water and then began gathering the items that had spilled from Dorothy's purse. A compact mirror, a small wallet, a pill organizer, and a folded piece of paper that looked like a shopping list. Andre had joined them too, standing awkwardly at the edge of the small crowd that had begun to gather. "What happened?" a passerby asked. "Looks like heat exhaustion. Keisha explained, helping Dorothy take small sips of water. The ambulance is on its way. Dorothy's embarrassment was beginning to overtake her confusion. I don't need an ambulance, she protested weakly. Just help me to that bench and I'll be fine in a minute. Keisha shook her head. Your pulse is rapid and you're showing signs of dehydration. You need to be checked out properly. Dorothy wasn't used to being fussed over. Since her husband Thomas had passed 3 years ago, she'd grown accustomed to handling things on her own. Their only daughter lived across the country in Oregon with her own family, calling once a week but visiting only on holidays. Dorothy hadn't wanted to be a burden. What's your name? Keisha asked, partly to keep Dorothy talking, partly to assess her mental status. Dorothy Wilson, she replied, her voice steadier now. The water was helping. I'm Keisha and this is my husband Lamar. Our children are Nia and Andre. Dorothy managed a small smile. Thank you for stopping. Most people these days are in too much of a hurry to notice an old woman having a spell. We couldn't just drive by, Lamar said, returning her smile. He had a kind face with laugh lines around his eyes. Besides, my wife is the best nurse in the county. You're in good hands. The sound of sirens grew louder and soon an ambulance pulled up alongside them. 2 paramedics emerged carrying equipment. Her name is Dorothy Wilson, Keisha informed them as they approached. Possible heat exhaustion and dehydration. No loss of consciousness but significant dizziness and weakness. Pulse is rapid but regular. The paramedics nodded appreciatively at Keisha's professional assessment as they took over, checking Dorothy's blood pressure and temperature. We're going to take you to County General to get checked out. Ma'am, the younger paramedic explained as they prepared to lift Dorothy onto the stretcher. Fear flashed across Dorothy's face. My cats, Spencer and Grace, they'll need feeding. Nia tugged at her mother's sleeve. We could feed her cats, couldn't we, Mom? Keisha hesitated only briefly before nodding. Of course we can. Dorothy, is your address on your ID? And do you have keys with you? Dorothy's relief was visible. Yes, in my wallet. The blue house at 728 Elm Street. The spare key is under the turtle statue by the back door. As the paramedics loaded Dorothy into the ambulance, Lamar checked his watch and exchanged a glance with Keisha. The basketball tournament would have to wait. We'll follow you to the hospital, Keisha told Dorothy, squeezing her hand gently. And don't worry about Spencer and Grace, we'll make sure they're taken care of. Tears welled in Dorothy's eyes. Why would you do all this for a stranger? Keisha's answer was simple. Because no one should have to face hard times alone. As the ambulance doors closed, the Taylor family returned to their minivan. The tournament forgotten for now, they followed the ambulance toward County General, unaware that this chance encounter on a hot summer day was about to change all their lives in ways none of them could have imagined. Andre broke the silence in the car. So, does this mean I miss my game? Lamar nodded, meeting his son's eyes in the rearview mirror. Sometimes life throws more important things our way, son. Like helping people? Nia asked, clutching Dorothy's belongings in her small hands. Exactly like that, Keisha answered, reaching back to pat her daughter's knee. The tournament will still be there next weekend. But right now, Dorothy needs friends more than the world needs another basketball game. As they drove, Keisha couldn't shake the image of Dorothy's face when she'd mentioned her cats, not worried for herself, but for the creatures that depended on her. It spoke volumes about the kind of person she was, and the fact that she'd been walking to get her medication in this heat alone. It made Keisha wonder how many other Dorothys were out there, aging invisibly in a world that moved too fast to notice them. The ambulance turned into the hospital entrance ahead of them, and the Taylor family prepared to step into a story much larger than the brief roadside encounter that had begun it. A story of unlikely friendship, healing, and the family we find in the most unexpected moments. The emergency room at County General was bustling with activity when the ambulance arrived with Dorothy. Nurses and doctors moved with practiced efficiency, their rubber-soled shoes squeaking against the polished floors. The paramedics wheeled her through sliding glass doors as Keisha hurried alongside, still holding Dorothy's worn leather purse. BP is 90-60, pulse 110 and thready, one paramedic reported to the receiving nurse. Patient experienced syncope episode on 5th Street, likely due to heat exposure and possible dehydration. Dorothy blinked under the harsh fluorescent lights. Everything was happening so quickly around her, voices overlapping as she was transferred from the ambulance stretcher to a hospital bed. She felt a sharp pinch as someone inserted a needle into her arm. We're starting an IV to get you hydrated, Mrs. Wilson. a young doctor explained, leaning into her field of vision. How are you feeling now? Like a fool, Dorothy replied weakly. All this fuss over a little dizzy spell. The doctor smiled kindly. Heat exhaustion isn't something to take lightly, especially. He stopped himself from saying at your age, but Dorothy knew what he meant. Especially for stubborn old ladies who forget to drink water. She finished for him with a hint of humor in her voice. In the waiting area, Lamar settled into an uncomfortable plastic chair with Nia and Andre. Nia clutched Dorothy's shopping list, which she had carefully folded and placed in her pocket. How long do we have to stay, Dad? Andre asked, glancing at his phone. Coach is texting about the tournament. Lamar gave his son a look that quieted him immediately. Your mom is checking on Mrs. Wilson. We'll stay as long as we need to. Nia swung her legs too short to reach the floor. What about her cats? Spencer and Grace? They're probably hungry. Lamar checked his watch. You're right. Let me see where your mom is, then maybe we'll split up. Some of us can check on the cats while the others stay here. Behind a thin curtain in the ER, Keisha was speaking with the doctor while a nurse attached a heart monitor to Dorothy. Classic case of dehydration combined with heat exhaustion, the doctor told Keisha quietly. We'll run some basic tests, get her fluids up, and she should be fine to go home later today. Does she have family coming? Keisha hesitated. I'm not sure. We just happened to be driving by when she collapsed. I can ask her, the doctor nodded gratefully. That would be helpful. We prefer not to discharge elderly patients alone, especially after a fall. Keisha returned to Dorothy's bedside. The older woman already looked better with the IV drip delivering much-needed fluids to her system. The doctor says you're going to be just fine, Keisha said, pulling up a chair. They'll keep you for a few hours to run some tests and make sure you're properly hydrated. Dorothy nodded, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Thank you for everything, but you really don't need to stay. I'm sure you have better things to do than babysit an old woman who forgot to drink her water. Actually, we were wondering if there's someone we should call for you. Family, maybe? A shadow passed over Dorothy's face. My daughter lives in Portland. No need to worry her over something like this, she paused. My neighbor Mr. Chen sometimes checks on me, but he's visiting his son in Chicago this week. Keisha recognized the careful way Dorothy avoided directly answering the question. Working in healthcare for 15 years had taught her to read between the lines. This woman was alone, at least for now. Well, we promised to check on Spencer and Grace, and we keep our promises, Keisha said with a smile. My husband and kids are in the waiting room. Would it be okay if they went to feed your cats while I stay with you? Relief flooded Dorothy's face. That would be wonderful, thank you. There's cat food in the cupboard above the refrigerator. They each get half a can in the evening, but after all this excitement, perhaps they deserve a full one. Keisha squeezed her hand. I'll let Lamar know. In the waiting room, Lamar was trying to keep both children occupied. Andre had resigned himself to missing the tournament and was now playing a game on his phone, while Nia had discovered the joys of spinning in the waiting room chairs. Nia, you're going to make yourself dizzy, Lamar warned just as Keisha approached. How is she? Lamar asked, standing to meet his wife. Better. They're giving her fluids and running some tests. She'll likely be discharged later today, but... Keisha lowered her voice. She doesn't have anyone to call. Her daughter lives across the country and her neighbor is out of town. Lamar nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. So she'd be going home alone. Exactly. And after a fall like that, it's not ideal. Nia tugged at her father's sleeve. What about Spencer and Grace? Keisha smiled at her daughter. Actually, I was thinking you, Dad, and Andre could go feed the cats while I stay here with Mrs. Wilson. She gave me instructions for their food. Andre perked up. Can we stop for lunch on the way? I'm starving. Lamar checked with Keisha, who nodded. Good idea. Why don't you bring back something for Dorothy and me as well? Nothing too heavy, maybe soup and a sandwich? With the plan settled, Lamar and the children left for Dorothy's house while Keisha returned to the emergency room. She found Dorothy looking anxiously at the clock on the wall. Everything okay? Keisha asked. Dorothy sighed. They want to admit me overnight for observation. I told them it's unnecessary, but apparently my potassium levels are low, and they're concerned about my heart rhythm. That's actually pretty serious, Keisha said, taking a seat. Potassium affects how your heart beats. It's good they caught it. Dorothy's shoulders sagged in resignation. I suppose. But a hospital stay will cost a fortune, even with Medicare. Keisha understood this worry all too well. She saw it daily in her patients' eyes, the mental calculations. weighing health against finances in a system that often forced impossible choices. "Let's focus on getting you better first," she suggested gently. "My husband and kids went to feed Spencer and Grace. They'll bring back some lunch for us too." Dorothy's eyes widened. "You're staying? But what about your son's basketball game?" "There will be other games," Keisha said simply. "And nobody should be alone in a hospital." Meanwhile, Lamar pulled up to the address Dorothy had given them. The blue house on Elm Street was small but well-maintained, with neatly trimmed hedges and flower boxes blooming with red geraniums. "She lives here by herself?" Andre asked as they got out of the car. "Looks like it," Lamar replied, leading them around to the back door. "Nia, you said the key is under a turtle statue?" Nia nodded importantly. "That's what she told Mom. They found the ceramic turtle nestled among hostas beside the back steps. Underneath was a single key on a faded ribbon." Lamar unlocked the door, and they stepped into a tidy kitchen with yellow curtains and well-worn linoleum. No sooner had they entered than two cats appeared, one orange tabby and one gray, regarding the strangers with suspicious eyes. "Spencer and Grace, I presume," Lamar said with a chuckle. "Which is which?" The orange cat meowed loudly and wound between Nia's legs, while the gray one maintained a cautious distance. "I think the orange one is Spencer," Nia decided, crouching down to pet him. "He's friendlier." Andre found the cat food where Dorothy had said it would be. "Half a can each, but Mom said they could have a full one today, right?" "That's right," Lamar confirmed, opening the refrigerator to check if Dorothy had anything that might spoil. It was sparsely stocked: milk, eggs, some apples, and a covered dish of what looked like leftover casserole. While Andre fed the cats, Nia wandered into the living room. "Dad, come look," she called. Lamar joined her to find a wall covered with framed photographs, Dorothy through the years, from a young woman in a wedding dress to more recent photos with who must be her daughter's family. One photo showed a younger Dorothy with a tall man beside a classic car. "That must be her husband," Lamar said quietly. "Where is he now?" Nia asked. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe he passed away." Nia considered this. "That's sad, being all alone." "She has Spencer and Grace," Andre said, joining them, "and neighbors who check on her sometimes." Lamar looked around the tidy home with its crocheted afghan on the sofa, well-worn paperbacks on the shelves, and the lingering scent of lavender sachet. This was a home filled with memories but short on new ones. "Let's get lunch and head back to the hospital," he suggested. "I have an idea I want to run by your mother." At County General, Dorothy had been moved to a regular room. Her IV was still running, adding potassium and fluids to her system. Keisha sat beside her, the two women talking like old friends despite having met just hours ago. "So after 30 years of teaching third grade, I retired," Dorothy was saying. "Thomas and I had all these plans to travel. We'd saved up. But then his heart..." She trailed off. "How long ago was that?" Keisha asked gently. 3 years this October." Dorothy smoothed the thin hospital blanket. "My daughter wanted me to move to Portland after, but I couldn't leave our home. Too many memories. Good ones mostly." A nurse came in to check Dorothy's vitals. "Looking much better, Mrs. Wilson. How are you feeling?" "Ready to go home," Dorothy replied firmly. The nurse smiled. "The doctor will be by later to decide about that. In the meantime, you have visitors." Lamar appeared in the doorway holding a takeout bag. Behind him, Nia clutched a small bouquet of daisies clearly purchased from the hospital gift shop, and Andre carried a drink tray. "Spencer and Grace send their regards," Lamar announced. "And we brought lunch." The simple act of kindness, this family interrupting their day to care for a stranger and her cats, brought unexpected tears to Dorothy's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay you all for your kindness." Keisha unpacked the soup and sandwiches while Nia presented the flowers. "You don't need to repay kindness," the young girl said with the simple wisdom of children. "That's why it's a gift." As they shared lunch in the small hospital room, Dorothy felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. The warmth of being cared for, of mattering to someone. It wasn't just the fall or the medical care she needed. Perhaps what she'd been missing most was this simple human connection. "The doctor mentioned they want to keep you overnight," Keisha said as they finished eating. "Lamar and I were talking, and if you're comfortable with it, I could pick you up tomorrow when they discharge you. Make sure you get home safely." Dorothy started to protest but stopped herself. The thought of having someone to help her home was more comforting than she wanted to admit. Actually, she said finally. That would be very nice. If you're sure it's no trouble. No trouble at all, Lamar assured her, and we can check on Spencer and Grace again tonight. As the Taylors prepared to leave, promising to return the next day, Dorothy realized that her unfortunate fall on 5th Street might have been a blessing in disguise. Sometimes help comes in unexpected ways, and sometimes family is found rather than born. We'll see you tomorrow. Mrs. Wilson, Nia called as they left, waving from the doorway. For the first time in years, Dorothy found herself looking forward to tomorrow. Dorothy woke to the sound of a breakfast tray being set on her bedside table. She blinked, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings before remembering. The fall, the hospital, the kind family who had come to her aid. Good morning, Mrs. Wilson, the nurse said cheerfully. How are we feeling today? Dorothy sat up, adjusting her thin hospital gown. Much better, thank you. When can I go home? The doctor will be by on round soon. If your labs look good, you should be discharged this morning. The nurse checked Dorothy's IV. Your potassium levels were much improved overnight. Dorothy nodded, relieved. Hospitals made her nervous. They reminded her too much of Thomas's final days. The sooner she could get back to her own home, the better. She picked at her breakfast, tasteless scrambled eggs and lukewarm coffee, as she watched the morning news. A weather report warned of continued high temperatures throughout the week. Dorothy made a mental note to fill her water bottle before venturing out again. The doctor arrived just after 9, a clipboard in hand. Good news, Mrs. Wilson. Your electrolytes are back in balance and there's no sign of any injury from your fall. I'm going to discharge you, but with a few precautions. Dorothy listened as he outlined his instructions. Drink plenty of water, especially in hot weather. Consider using a grocery delivery service on extremely hot days. Follow up with her primary care physician next week. Do you have someone picking you up? He asked finally. Hospital policy for patients over 70, especially after a fall. Yes, Dorothy answered, surprising herself with how confident she felt about it. My friend Keisha is coming for me, and the word had slipped out naturally, though she'd only met Keisha yesterday. But after the kindness the Taylor family had shown her, stranger no longer seemed accurate, as if summoned by her thoughts. There was a light knock on the door, and Keisha appeared, dressed in scrubs. Hope I'm not interrupting, she said. I have an early shift today, so I thought I'd check on you before I start. The doctor smiled. Perfect timing. I was just discharging Mrs. Wilson. I'll have the nurse bring the paperwork. After he left, Keisha sat in the visitor's chair. How are you feeling this morning? Much better. Thank you for coming. Dorothy hesitated. I told the doctor you were my friend. I hope that's all right. Keisha's smile was warm. Of course it is. And don't worry about the timing. My shift doesn't actually start until noon. I just wanted to make sure you got home safely. But what about your work? And your family? Lamar has the day off and the kids are fine. As for work, I have plenty of time. Keisha leaned in conspiratorially. Besides, I brought you some real clothes. Hospital gowns aren't exactly made for fashion, are they? She held up a shopping bag containing the clothes Dorothy had been wearing yesterday, now freshly laundered and folded. You washed my clothes? Dorothy was touched by the thoughtfulness. Seemed the least we could do, since we were already taking care of Spencer and Grace. An hour later, dressed in her own clothes and clutching the discharge paperwork, Dorothy was wheeled to the hospital entrance despite her protests that she could walk perfectly well. Hospital policy, the volunteer pushing the wheelchair explained. Cheerfully, Keisha's car was waiting at the curb, a blue sedan with a child's soccer ball visible in the back seat. Dorothy settled into the passenger seat, suddenly feeling shy. It was one thing to accept help in an emergency, but this felt different. I hope I'm not taking up too much of your time, she said as Keisha pulled away from the hospital. Not at all. Actually, I thought we might stop at the grocery store on the way to your house. The doctor mentioned staying hydrated, and when we fed the cats yesterday, I noticed your fridge was a bit empty. Dorothy started to object. She wasn't a charity case, but something in Keisha's tone stopped her. There was no pity there, just practical kindness. That would be nice, she said instead. Thank you. At the grocery store, Dorothy insisted on using her own money, but allowed Keisha to guide her toward foods that would keep her strength up in the heat. They filled the cart with easy-to-prepare meals, fresh fruits, and several bottles of electrolyte drinks. "These are good to have on hand," Keisha explained, adding a box of popsicles to their cart. "They cool you down and help with hydration." The kids loved them after soccer practice. As they shopped, their conversation flowed more naturally. Dorothy found herself sharing stories about her teaching days, while Keisha talked about her work at the hospital and her children's activities. "Andre's basketball is getting serious. He's hoping for a scholarship eventually. And Nia is our little artist. You should see the pictures she draws." "I'd like that," Dorothy said, surprising herself again. When was the last time she'd looked forward to seeing someone's artwork, or anyone for that matter? When they arrived at her house, Dorothy was pleased to see that everything was in order. Spencer immediately wound around her ankles, while Grace watched cautiously from the top of the refrigerator. "They've missed you," Keisha observed, helping to put away the groceries. "They're good company," Dorothy replied, reaching up to scratch Grace's ears. "It gets quiet here sometimes, but they keep me on my toes." Keisha checked her watch. "I should head to work soon, but I wanted to make sure you're settled first." "Is there anything else you need?" Dorothy hesitated. She didn't want to seem needy, but she also didn't want this unexpected connection to end. "Actually, I was wondering." She took a breath. "Would your family like to come for dinner this weekend? As a thank you. I make a pretty good pot roast, and I'd love to properly meet your children." Keisha's face lit up. "We'd love that. How about Saturday evening? I'm off that day." Saturday would be perfect. After Keisha left, Dorothy sat in her favorite armchair, stroking Spencer as he purred in her lap. The house felt different somehow, less empty even though she was still the only person in it. For the first time in a long while, she had something to look forward to. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Dorothy cleaned every corner of her already tidy house, pulled out her best dishes from the china cabinet, and carefully planned a menu that she hoped would appeal to both adults and children. By Saturday afternoon, the pot roast was simmering in the slow cooker, filling the house with savory aromas. Dorothy had just put a batch of chocolate chip cookies in the oven when her phone rang. "Mrs. Wilson? It's Nia. Mom said I could call to ask if we can bring anything tonight." Dorothy smiled at the child's polite inquiry. "Just yourselves, dear. Everything's ready. I can't wait. I drew a picture for you. And guess what? Dad's bringing his guitar. He plays really good." "I look forward to hearing him," Dorothy replied, touched by the thought that they were putting such care into this visit. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Dorothy smoothed her dress, a floral print she hadn't worn in ages, and opened the door to find the entire Taylor family on her porch. Lamar held a bouquet of mixed flowers while Keisha carried a cake box. Andre stood awkwardly with his hands in his pockets, but Nia bounced excitedly, clutching a folder that presumably contained her artwork. "Welcome," Dorothy said, stepping back to let them in. "I'm so glad you could come." "Something smells amazing," Lamar remarked as they entered. "Pot roast. My husband's favorite recipe." Dorothy led them to the dining room, where the table was set with her best linen and the china she usually saved for holidays. Dinner was a livelier affair than her house had seen in years. Andre gradually warmed up, sharing stories about his basketball team between bites of food. Nia chatted happily about school and showed Dorothy her drawings, colorful scenes filled with imagination. Lamar and Keisha talked about their work and asked Dorothy questions about her life, genuinely interested in her answers. After dinner, Lamar brought in his guitar as promised, and they moved to the living room. His playing was skillful, and soon they were all singing along to songs everyone knew, from Beatles classics to Disney tunes for Nia. "Do you play anything, Mrs. Wilson?" Nia asked during a break. Dorothy glanced at the corner of the room where her piano sat, mostly unused these days. "I used to teach piano, actually." For many years, Nia's eyes widened. "Really? Could you play something for us?" Encouraged by their interest, Dorothy moved to the piano bench and positioned her fingers on the keys. It had been a while, but the muscle memory remained. She began with a simple melody, then grew more confident, adding complexity as the music flowed through her. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before they all applauded. "That was beautiful," Keisha said. "Can you teach me?" Nia asked eagerly. Lamar chuckled. "Slow down, sweetheart. Mrs. Wilson might not want a student at her age." "Actually," Dorothy said slowly, "I've missed teaching. If you're really interested, Nia, I'd be happy to give you lessons. The girl's face lit up. Really, when can we start? The evening ended with plans for Nia's first piano lesson the following week, and a promise that the Taylors would return for dinner again soon. As Dorothy waved goodbye from her porch, watching their car pull away, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat. Inside, she carefully washed and put away the dishes, humming the songs they had sung together. The house didn't seem as quiet as before. It was as if the music and laughter had seeped into the walls, leaving echoes of connection and possibility. Dorothy picked up a framed photo of Thomas from the mantel. "You would have liked them," she told his smiling image. "They remind me a little of us when the children were small." For the first time in 3 years, thinking of Thomas brought more smiles than tears. Perhaps that was the most unexpected gift the Taylors had given her, a gentle nudge back toward the land of the living. The summer heat gradually gave way to the golden hues of early autumn. Leaves began to turn on the old maple tree outside Dorothy's window, and mornings carried the first hints of crispness in the air. Inside her blue house on Elm Street, something else was blooming, a friendship that had grown from the most unexpected of beginnings. "Remember to curve your fingers, like they're resting on an orange," Dorothy instructed gently as Nia's small hands positioned themselves on the piano keys. It was Wednesday afternoon, time for Nia's weekly piano lesson. What had started as a casual offer had quickly become a highlight of Dorothy's week. For the past month, the young girl had arrived after school, backpack still on her shoulders, eager to learn. "Like this?" Nia asked, adjusting her fingers and looking up for approval. "Perfect. Now let's try that scale again." As Nia played, Dorothy felt a familiar pride swell in her chest, the same feeling that had sustained her through 40 years of teaching. Nia was a quick study, her natural enthusiasm making up for any technical challenges. The girl approached each new piece with a determination that reminded Dorothy of herself at that age. "You're making wonderful progress," Dorothy said when they finished. "Have you been practicing at home?" Nia nodded proudly. "Dad found a keyboard at a yard sale. It's not as nice as your piano, but I can practice my scales on it." The front door opened and closed, followed by Keisha's voice calling out, "Just me," dropping off Andre before heading back to work. This too had become part of their routine. Keisha would bring Andre over after his basketball practice on days when she had evening shifts at the hospital. The arrangement had started when Dorothy mentioned an old shelf that needed fixing, and Lamar had suggested that Andre could help. One repair had led to another, and soon the teenager was regularly spending a few hours at Dorothy's house, doing odd jobs while Nia had her lessons. "Hey, Mrs. Wilson," Andre said, appearing in the doorway. At 15, he was all angles and awkward grace, growing so quickly that his jeans already showed his ankles. "Mom said you have a leaky faucet?" Dorothy smiled at him. "In the upstairs bathroom. Nothing urgent, but it's been dripping for days. I'll take a look." He hesitated. "And I brought my history textbook. You said you might help me with that essay on the civil rights movement." "Of course. We can work on that after you fix the faucet." Keisha popped her head in. "I've got to run late shift. Lamar will pick up the kids around 6. She looked at Dorothy. "Don't forget about Sunday dinner. Lamar's making his famous ribs." "I wouldn't miss it," Dorothy replied. After Keisha left, Dorothy watched Nia practice while Andre thumped upstairs with his toolbox, a birthday gift from his father, which he carried with no small amount of pride. The sounds of a teenager fixing a faucet and a child playing Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star filled the once quiet house, creating a symphony more beautiful to Dorothy than any classical piece. Later, sitting at the kitchen table with Andre's history book open between them, Dorothy shared stories of her own experiences during the civil rights era. The teenager listened with surprising interest as she described attending a protest march in college, seeing the changes in her hometown, and teaching in a newly integrated school. "That's way better than the stuff in our textbook," Andre said. "You actually lived through all this history," Dorothy chuckled. "That's the funny thing about getting older. The things you just lived through become history for the next generation." Andre scribbled notes for his essay. "Did you always want to be a teacher?" "Not always. I wanted to be a concert pianist once." Dorothy's eyes drifted to a framed photograph on the wall, herself as a young woman at a piano recital. "But then I discovered I loved teaching even more than performing." "Why'd you stop?" "Teaching, I mean." The question was asked innocently, but it made Dorothy pause. Retirement seemed like the right choice at the time.
Thomas, my husband, and I had plans to travel, she sighed.
After he passed, I just never went back to it. Andre nodded, seeming to understand more than his years might suggest. Well, Nia thinks you're the best teacher ever. And what about you? Still set on basketball? He shrugged. It's my best shot at college. Mom and Dad save what they can, but scholarships would help a lot. Dorothy heard the pressure behind his casual words. You know, colleges look at more than just sports. That history essay might be more important than you think. By Sunday, Dorothy found herself looking forward to dinner at the Taylors' with an eagerness that surprised her. She dressed carefully, brought a freshly baked apple pie, and even added a touch of lipstick, something she hadn't bothered with in years. The Taylors lived in a modest 2-story home in a neighborhood about 15 minutes from Dorothy's. Their house was always alive with music, conversation, and the controlled chaos of a busy family. Dorothy had come to love the noise and activity, so different from the quiet of her own home. There she is, Lamar called from the backyard grill as Dorothy arrived. He wore an apron that read, "Kiss the Cook," and wielded tongs with expertise. Just in time. The ribs are almost done. Inside, Keisha was tossing a salad while Nia set the table. Andre was sprawled on the living room floor with Spencer, who had somehow become a regular visitor as well. The orange cat had taken a particular liking to the Taylor household, and now often traveled with Dorothy on these Sunday visits. He's teaching Spencer to high-five, Keisha explained, nodding toward her son and the cat. Been at it for weeks. Dinner was served on the patio with twinkling string lights overhead and the smoky scent of barbecue in the air. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from Keisha's challenging week at the hospital to Andre's upcoming basketball tournament and Nia's progress on a new piano piece. Oh, before I forget, Keisha said, reaching for her phone. What are you doing 2 weeks from Friday, Dorothy? Dorothy thought for a moment. Nothing special. Why do you ask? The hospital is having its annual fundraiser gala. Lots of boring speeches, but good food and dancing. Lamar and I have an extra ticket if you'd like to join us. Oh, I don't know. Dorothy hesitated. I haven't been to a formal event in ages. You'd be doing us a favor, Lamar insisted. These things are more fun with friends. Friends. There was that word again, but now it felt right. Natural. In just a few months, these people had become an important part of her life. All right, she agreed. I'd be happy to come. Great. It's settled. Keisha typed something on her phone, then looked up with a strange expression. By the way, when's your birthday, Dorothy? I just realized we don't know. The question caught her off guard. October 15th, actually. That's next week, Nia exclaimed. Do you have any plans? Lamar asked casually. Too casually, Dorothy thought. She shook her head. Not really. I haven't properly celebrated my birthday since Thomas passed. My daughter usually calls, sends flowers. A look passed between Lamar and Keisha that Dorothy couldn't quite interpret. How old will you be? Nia asked, earning a gentle Nia, that's not polite, from her mother. Dorothy laughed. It's all right. I'll be 79. Nothing to hide about that. Later, as Dorothy was preparing to leave, Nia hugged her tightly. See you on Wednesday for my lesson, Mrs. Wilson. I'll be there to pick her up, Andre added. Coach canceled practice that day. Something about the way the whole family was acting struck Dorothy as odd, but she dismissed it as her imagination. As Lamar walked her to her car, he mentioned casually, By the way, I noticed your back step. Are getting a bit wobbly. Mind if Andre and I come by next weekend to fix them? That would be wonderful, thank you. Dorothy was continually touched by their thoughtfulness. The following days passed in their new normal rhythm, piano lessons with Nia, help with homework for Andre, occasional cups of tea with Keisha when their schedules aligned. Dorothy found herself busier than she had been in years, her calendar filled with small but meaningful engagements. On the morning of her birthday, Dorothy woke to a quiet house, just as she had expected. She made her usual cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the neighborhood come to life. Spencer and Grace curled around her feet, seeking warmth as the autumn chill seeped through the old windows. The phone rang at precisely 9 o'clock, her daughter calling from Portland. Happy birthday, Mom, came the familiar voice. The flowers should arrive this afternoon. Thank you, dear. How are the children? They chatted for 20 minutes about grandchildren and her daughter's work, before saying goodbye with promises to talk again soon. Dorothy had just hung up when her doorbell rang. Surprised by a visitor so early, she opened the door to find Nia standing on her porch, practically vibrating with excitement. "Happy birthday, Mrs. Wilson. Mom said to give you this." She handed Dorothy a small envelope. Inside was a note in Keisha's handwriting. "Be ready at 4 p.m., wear something nice. No questions." "What's this about?" Dorothy asked, but Nia just grinned and skipped back down the steps to where Lamar was waiting in the car. "It's a surprise," she called over her shoulder. "See you later." As their car pulled away, Dorothy stood on her porch, the mysterious note in her hand and an unexpected feeling of anticipation blooming in her chest. For the first time in years, she was genuinely curious about what her birthday might bring. Dorothy spent the afternoon in a state of pleasant anticipation, wondering what the Taylors could possibly have planned. She took extra care with her appearance, choosing a blue dress she hadn't worn in years and pinning her silver hair into a neat bun. As she fastened her pearl earrings, a gift from Thomas on their 30th anniversary, she studied her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her had changed over the past few months. There was color in her cheeks now, a sparkle in her eyes that had been missing for too long. She looked, Dorothy realized with surprise, happy. At precisely 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Dorothy opened it to find Lamar standing on her porch, dressed in a suit and tie. "Your chariot awaits. Birthday girl," he said with a playful bow, gesturing to his freshly washed car at the curb. "Where are we going?" Dorothy asked as he helped her with her coat. Now, Keisha was very clear. "No questions." His eyes twinkled with mischief. "Just trust us." During the drive, Lamar chatted about work and the kids but skillfully avoided any hints about their destination. Dorothy watched out the window as they passed through familiar neighborhoods, then turned onto a road she didn't recognize. "I thought the hospital fundraiser wasn't until next week," she said, trying to piece together the puzzle. Lamar just smiled. "You're right about that." Finally, they pulled up to a community center Dorothy had passed many times but never entered. The parking lot was unusually full for a Wednesday evening. "What's going on here?" she asked as Lamar helped her from the car. "You'll see." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling a flutter of nervous excitement. As they approached the entrance, Dorothy could hear music playing inside, a piano, she realized. The melody was familiar, a piece she had taught Nia just a few weeks ago. Lamar opened the door and Dorothy stepped inside. Surprise! The room erupted with voices as the lights came up to reveal a crowd of smiling faces. Dorothy's hand flew to her mouth in shock. The community center had been transformed with balloons, flowers, and a banner that read, "Happy 79th birthday, Dorothy." Nia rushed forward first, wrapping her arms around Dorothy's waist. "Were you surprised?" "We've been planning for weeks." Before Dorothy could answer, Keisha appeared at her side. "Happy birthday," she said, hugging Dorothy warmly. "I hope you don't mind the fuss." Dorothy was too overwhelmed to speak. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in not just the Taylor family but at least 30 other people. She recognized Mr. Chen, her neighbor, the pharmacist from Morgan's who filled her prescriptions, several parents of former piano students, and even a group of teachers she had worked with before retirement. "How did you—" she finally managed. "We had a little help," Keisha explained, nodding toward a tall woman making her way through the crowd. "Hello, Mom." Dorothy's heart leaped. "Patricia?" Her daughter embraced her tightly. "Happy birthday. Sorry for the little white lie about the flowers. You came all the way from Portland?" Dorothy's voice trembled. "I wouldn't miss it. Keisha called me last month. We've been coordinating ever since." Dorothy looked between her daughter and Keisha in amazement. "You two know each other?" The women exchanged smiles. "We've talked quite a bit," Patricia said. "I wanted to meet the family who's been taking such good care of my mother. And we wanted to meet the daughter she's so proud of," Keisha added. Dorothy was ushered to a seat of honor as people came forward to greet her. Many faces she hadn't seen in years. Some she had thought forgotten her entirely. "Remember me, Mrs. Wilson?" A young man in his 30s approached. "Tommy Phillips. You taught me piano for 8 years." "Tommy. Of course I remember. You always wanted to play boogie-woogie instead of Bach." He laughed. "Still do." In fact, he gestured to the piano in the corner where a small jazz combo was setting up. "Some of your former students put together a little musical tribute." As Dorothy watched in wonder, 6 former students, now adults with lives and families of their own, performed a medley of her favorite songs. The final piece was a jazz arrangement of the classical piece she had played at her last recital before retirement. Andre appeared at her side with a glass of punch. Pretty cool, right? Mom found their names in your old lesson book and tracked them all down. Your mother is a remarkable woman, Dorothy said, her voice thick with emotion. Yeah, she's pretty awesome. Andre fidgeted with his tie. Oh, I got an A on that history essay. Wanted you to know. Dorothy squeezed his hand. I'm so proud of you. The evening unfolded like a beautiful dream. There was dinner, a buffet featuring all of Dorothy's favorite foods, including Thomas's pot roast recipe that she had shared with Keisha. There were speeches, touching words from former colleagues, neighbors, and students about the impact Dorothy had made on their lives. Naya performed her newest piano piece, playing with a confidence that brought tears to Dorothy's eyes. Mr. Chen revealed that he had been a piano tuner in his youth and offered to tune Dorothy's old piano free of charge. Even the mailman had come, bringing a card signed by everyone on her route. As the party continued around her, Dorothy found a quiet moment to speak with her daughter. This is too much, she said, gesturing at the celebration. You didn't need to go to all this trouble. Patricia took her mother's hand. It wasn't just me. In fact, the Taylors did most of the work. They really care about you, Mom. I've been meaning to visit more often, Patricia continued, a hint of guilt in her voice. After Dad died, you seemed to want space, and I got so caught up in my own life. No, Dorothy interrupted. You have your family, your work. I understand that, but you're my family too. And after talking with Keisha, I realize I should have tried harder. Patricia looked across the room to where the Taylors were chatting with guests. When she told me how you collapsed on the street, how they just happened to be driving by, I can't stop thinking about what might have happened if they hadn't been there. Dorothy followed her gaze. They saved me in more ways than one that day. Keisha said you're teaching piano again. Nia showed me what you've been working on. Dorothy nodded. Just one student for now, but it's a start, Patricia finished. Mom, I've been thinking. What if you came to Portland for Christmas this year? The kids would love to see their grandmother, and maybe you could give my Sophie a few piano lessons while you're there. Before Dorothy could answer, Lamar called for everyone's attention. Time for cake. The crowd gathered as Keisha wheeled out a beautiful two-tiered cake, decorated with musical notes and tiny sugar flowers. 79 candles would have been a fire hazard, so instead, there were 7 large candles and 9 small ones. As everyone sang happy birthday, Dorothy looked around at the faces surrounding her. Her daughter, the Taylor family who had become so dear to her, former students and colleagues, neighbors and friends both old and new, so many connections she had thought lost, and new ones she never expected to make. When it came time to blow out the candles, Dorothy closed her eyes. What do you wish for when you already have more than you thought possible? The answer came easily. More time, more music. More Sunday dinners and piano lessons and conversations that stretched late into the evening. More life to live, now that she had found her way back to living it fully. She drew a deep breath and blew out the candles in one try, to cheers and applause. Later, as the party began to wind down, Dorothy found herself sitting beside Keisha, watching Lamar and Andre play a good-natured game of ping-pong on a table in the corner. I don't know how to thank you, Dorothy said, her voice still husky with emotion. All of this, it's beyond anything I could have imagined, Keisha smiled. You know, when we saw you fall that day, we were just doing what anyone would do. We didn't expect to gain another family member. Is that what I am? Dorothy asked softly. What else would you call it? You've helped Andre with school, you're teaching Naya piano. You listen to my hospital stories without falling asleep. And Lamar says you're the only person who truly appreciates his terrible jokes. They both laughed, watching as Nia tried to help her father by distracting Andre during a crucial point. Family isn't always blood, Keisha continued. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most and stay even when the crisis is over. Dorothy thought about that. Thomas and I always wanted more children, she confessed. After Patricia, we tried for years, but it wasn't meant to be. Lately, I've been thinking perhaps I was meant to have more family, just not in the way I expected. Life has a funny way of giving us what we need, doesn't it? Though sometimes the package is a bit unusual. Keisha nodded toward Patricia, who was approaching with 2 plates of cake. Like a daughter who lives far away but still loves you, and a new friend who happened to drive down the right street at the right moment. As the evening came to a close, Dorothy found herself surrounded once more by the Taylor family as they helped gather her gifts. You'll come to dinner on Sunday? Lamar asked as if there were any doubt. Of course. Dorothy looked at each of them in turn, Lamar with his kind eyes, Keisha with her steady strength, Andre with his quiet determination, and Nia with her boundless enthusiasm. You know, she said, the day I fell on that sidewalk was the luckiest unlucky day of my life. Nia slipped her small hand into Dorothy's. Can I tell you a secret, Mrs. Wilson? Dorothy leaned down. Of course, dear. I'm glad you fell even though that sounds mean. Because if you didn't, we wouldn't be friends now. Out of the mouths of children came the simplest truths. Dorothy pulled the girl into a hug, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. As they walked her to the car, Dorothy paused to look up at the stars scattered across the October sky. Thomas had always loved stargazing. Everything has a purpose, he used to say. Every star, every person, every moment. She hadn't understood what he meant about moments until now. A simple fall on a hot summer day. A family who stopped to help. A friendship that grew into something more. Separate threads woven together to create a tapestry more beautiful than she could have imagined. Dorothy Wilson, who had once felt her life was behind her, now looked forward to all the moments yet to come.